Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Deciphered right here on the CryptoCast Network. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate you joining us this morning here. It's a beautiful, beautiful day to be talking crypto. I have a fantastic guest that we're going to talk to in just a second. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and introduce the links again. As always, you guys can find us at CryptoCast.network, where you'll be able to find the Twitter, Instagram, iTunes, and RSS. And we also have our merch on our website for sale, of course. You can see that to support the channel. And as always, we are displaying our QR code at the bottom, as this is a community-supported YouTube channel. So we appreciate all the help and feedback that we get. And of course, we are still doing our Programming with Bitcoin.com interactive two-day workshop, where we'll be teaching C# developers how to work with Bitcoin, specifically how to work with the NBitcoin library, the creator of which is Nicolas Doyer. So he and myself will be the instructors for that course. And we just had our first one in Las Vegas. It went really great. We have some pictures on there on the website. You guys can check it out. And we hope to be coming to your city soon. First, we're going to be hitting San Francisco, October 13th, and Seattle, November 3rd. So with that aside, let's go ahead and stop the screen share and get right into it and introduce our amazing guest today. Ladies and gentlemen, I have with me Mr. Tankred Hase, the lead application developer at Lightning Labs. Tank, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I think we're going to have a good time. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. You guys, I'm sure, are pretty excited about with this new release of the wallet. But before we get into that, let's get just a little bit of info about you, Tank. First, of course, it's an amazing name, but it's short for Tankred. Of course, I can't really pronounce the name, so we're going to call you Tank. And I think that'll work for this show. So let me ask you this first. So how did you actually first get started with the Lightning Network? And then how did you transition from that into an actual position over there at Lightning Labs?
Sure. So I actually got into Bitcoin super late. My background is in like encryption and privacy and security. So I actually had a startup that was very similar to Proton Mail. We started around like 2013. And we also tried to build like a cross-platform email encryption app that kind of just bundled up all the encryption and made it usable. So that's kind of always been my passion, to just, try to kind of hide all of the technical details of cryptography and make it like a usable package for the average user. I actually got started with Bitcoin. I mean, I've been following it for a while, and like we actually had customers who wanted to pay in Bitcoin, and I was like, yeah, that's just nerd money, like those crazy people. What are they talking about?
We all dismiss it at first, including Andreas Antonopoulos. We all do it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's so funny. And then I actually really started taking it seriously when I was in Bali. So they were actually using this as a store of value because the Indonesian rupiah has such high inflation. And then I went to these meetups in Ubud, which is kind of like the technical and cultural center of Bali. There's a lot of startups there, and they have a weekly they had a weekly Bitcoin meetup with Willy Woo. I don't know if so he
absolutely he's the creator of the NVT ratio. He's really, really into the data. Really great guy. Recommend everybody follow him on Twitter. I believe it's Wooconomics, something like that. But just Google Willy Woo Bitcoin, you will find him.
Yeah, and like he kind of just, it was so fascinating to just like listen to the whole like economic side of it, the whole like political aspects of it, the socioeconomic. There's so many parts of it that he just kind of laid out. And like I went to the first startups, I didn't understand anything, and then like when I went to the second startup, I was like able to ask some questions and like dig more into the tech and everything. So that's how I got into it. And yeah, like, and once you get into it, you can't shut up about it. So when I was back, I was working for another startup last year, and I was like back working for them, and they said like, Tankred, like we appreciate your enthusiasm and passion about Bitcoin, but we'd appreciate it if you kept those conversations to the lunch break.
Yeah, just keep that on the down low.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's when okay, you have to work on this because you're obviously passionate about it. And then like, yeah, so I was looking for an opportunity to dive into to doing this, because like I had a technical background. I loved working in startups, and I actually saw the Lightning Labs job post in November, I think. And so I was like flying back from India, and then I saw this job post, and I was like tired, and but I immediately applied to the role because it just, I think it fit very well to like my background with like security and also like the technical stack that they were using. So yeah, that's like the rest is history. Now I get to work on the app, which is like a super awesome thing to do. Like it's just because everybody in the Bitcoin space is so passionate about this stuff, and like nobody really knows where it's going yet. It's all super new. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's very early days, of course, as I try to remind my listeners all the time. And so you said you basically saw the ad, you were ready to dive in, and you basically just submitted your application, and they hired you, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what happened. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Awesome, awesome. Well, it's great to hear. I mean, see, it's great to hear that that because people often say it's very difficult to get into industries, and and maybe to get into even to this industry because there's so much knowledge that is required. But really, like if you do the research, if you put the time in, there is positions out there that are in this industry. This is so early, as we said, there is just room for everybody, at this point to get in. So very 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 cool, Tank. It's just amazing, because it sounds like you're passionate about this project, and and it definitely sounds like you followed your passion to get here. So that is just great to hear. And it's just it sounds like you kind of agree that basically the use cases for a completely secure near instant payment network built on top of the world's most sound money is probably a good idea and probably has unlimited use cases, right?
Um, yeah, so this is the interesting thing like about me. I'm actually probably very like, I love listening to you and Jack Mallers when you were talking about Zap. Like it was so much fun, like you were asking, hey, what's the timeline to world domination? And he's like, it's like so funny. Like he's like, I don't know, 18 months. And then you were like, yeah, 18 months, all right. And he was like, yeah, 18 months. So you're like both, it was so great because you're like both, okay, obviously this is going to be done in 18 months. And I think what I've learned, like just at my time at Lightning Labs, is it's ready when it's ready. It like this stuff takes time, and I think what we also need to, like, I think there's two really main issues that make it really hard. The first issue is obviously we want to put the private key in the user's hands, and that's like a huge UX challenge. So I think we need to figure out how do we make that available to almost every user.
Sure.
Um,
Well, before we get into the actual wallet, because
yeah.
yeah, because I just want to make sure that that we're trying to follow some kind of organization here. So you just you just started recently, right? How long ago did you how long have you been working on this app?
Oh, I actually joined the company full time in January.
Okay. So fairly new, obviously. And then of course Lightning launched beta on mainnet in March. And so
Yeah.
that was probably a pretty exciting time as well.
Yeah.
Okay, very very cool. All right, so then let's get into maybe this wallet a little bit here. So you just so you've been working on this now for a few months, and let me ask you what immediately because you guys released a blog post that we'll share here in a second on this on screen for the viewers, but you released a blog post kind of outlining the information about this new wallet. But I wanted to sort of get into it a little bit more with you, and sort of get a one-on-one with you to sort of get your background on this. What really tell us what really differentiates this wallet from maybe the previous versions of the wallet and from other Lightning Wallet apps?
Sure. So I think if you look at most of the other apps right now, I've been like testing them, and they're like very early versions. So they expose a lot of like the technical guts, a lot of the technical details. Like they put the public key right in the user's face. You have a lot of like cryptographic primitives that are just like really like in the like they're just very visible, and this is okay because right now like there's mostly enthusiasts and early adopters kind of picking up these apps and like testing out the protocol, and that's fine. But I think as the protocol and the infrastructure matures, it's also really valuable to to package this stuff up in like a way where it's like digestible for an average user. You know, an average user doesn't know what a public key is, and he doesn't necessarily really care what a public key is. So the I guess the analogy I always make is that we don't want to build another PGP, right? We want to build Signal. Like Signal was, I think, the first, or like the Signal protocol was, I think, the first technology that really made end-to-end encryption like available to a mass audience. And when I say mass audience, I mean billions of people. And they did that not by putting all the cryptographic primitives and all of those details in the user's face. They actually made it all invisible. And that's why it scales to so many users, because they can just pick it up and use it. And I mean, obviously, we're not there yet with the Lightning app, but I think that's kind of our end goal, to get the protocol in a way where we're able to hide most of the details, like the channel management, right? Right now, it still needs to be there because the routing infrastructure isn't really as mature as it needs to be. So you might still need to open a channel manually once in a while. But like our hope is like once the routing infrastructure is more mature and Autopilot basically is able to pick routing nodes with better heuristics, that you won't need to see the channels page at all. Like that'll just disappear and just be in the background or in the advanced settings or something. So I think that's kind of what we're aiming towards, just like have a very minimalistic, very clean user experience.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So this is, let's get into a little bit maybe of the technicals of this. So this is meant to run as a standalone wallet, right? In light client, in actual light client mode. Now, this is using the Neutrino, right, which is the BIP 157 and 158. Maybe you can walk us through a little bit about what Neutrino is real quick.
Sure. So I'm not a protocol developer, so like
Oh,
probably
sure.
better to ask Lalu.
No problem.
And
But yeah, any high level,
Sure.
why it's important, of course, and all that good stuff.
Sure, definitely. So Neutrino is basically a light client, right? Um, you don't want to have the user have to download and verify the full Bitcoin blockchain on his iPhone, right? Obviously, right now this this wallet runs on the desktop, but the idea is to be able to reuse most of the code and just have a wallet that also runs on mobile phones. So in a nutshell, Neutrino is a light client that basically offers better privacy and just minimizes the data that needs to go over the network.
Yeah, and so this essentially allows for mobile wallets. I mean, basically, without Neutrino, we really couldn't have a fully functioning, Lightning wallet without any type of crazy complexities, like with a whole full node and all that crazy kind of stuff. We couldn't actually have like a Lightning wallet act like a standard Venmo or PayPal app before Neutrino. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean you could say that. I mean, on the desktop, we had an early prototype of the app, which basically had to work with a local full node, and the current app actually still does. So if you have a BTCD running on localhost, the app will just connect to it, because Neutrino also works over localhost, obviously. So it'll just use that. So if you want that extra security, you can just still do that, but you don't need to, right? You can just run the app.
And so I guess rephrase this makes it practical for the average user to run a Lightning wallet on a mobile device. So yeah, because like you say, before that you would have to do all sorts of custom configurations and things like that. So this is really, really cool. So then let me ask you this. So let's get into that a little bit. You said that so by default, though, this is going to, so this light client, this Lightning wallet will connect to a Bitcoin full node cluster that you guys support. Is that correct? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and why we need to do that.
Sure. So the main issue right now is like I think bit 157 or was it 158? One of those two was just there was a PR that was merged into Bitcoin Core. And obviously Bitcoin Core has market share right now, right? And Neutrino, so Neutrino isn't still yet fully supported in Bitcoin Core. but it is in BTCD, which is kind of like the Go implementation of a full node. And that's what we've been kind of testing with. And that's also what we are running on a cluster. So we have basically this load balanced BTCD cluster that we're running because we just need to have a full node that fully supports Neutrino. As more and more users either adopt BTCD or Bitcoin Core has full support, we just don't need to run that cluster anymore, right? Because the app will, just like any other light client wallet, will just find peers to connect to, and it'll be a little bit more decentralized. Right now, since we're like kind of you're downloading the binary from us, we figure you're trusting us to a certain extent. I mean, you can also compile it from source, but right now we kind of say, okay, just to make it usable, we're going to run this full node for you if you don't want to run your own.
Sure. Okay. Well, that makes sense. And this is exactly what I wanted to get into, is that this is just temporary. This is, temporary. People are going to be like screaming censorship. They're be like, this is all completely centralized. They're going to be screaming centralized. It's connecting to that. And guys, this is just temporary, right? So that we can easily start onboarding users, right? So this is a temporary measure to connect to this cluster, but eventually we won't need to do this. So another big aspect about this particular release is the complete redesign of the actual wallet itself, and the actual backend, targeted again towards more of these light clients, right? That's a big focus for this. So maybe you can get into a little bit about that. What was the thinking behind that new UX, and how long did that really take the team to realize that was the path that you guys wanted to go down?
Yeah, that was a really interesting discussion within the company as well, because like we're a very technical team, and obviously we have like the L&D team is a bunch of really smart people who are like in cryptography and protocol development, and they're super passionate about the protocol. And protocol developers want to show off the cool protocol, right? And so it was like, I was always, hey guys, it's awesome that the protocol works so well, but maybe we don't need to show everything. So it was like we went to this thing called the design sprint. So this was actually a process that was developed at Google Ventures, which they used to kind of have it's kind of like an agile methodology that also is very similar to like the lean methodology, where you kind of you have a very simple prototype, a UI prototype that you test against some users. So this is what we did, because we wanted to we were a bit afraid that our UI was going to be too simple, and that some maybe advanced Bitcoin users would be like turned off by this. So to kind of validate that assumption, or just make sure that we're not building the wrong thing, we actually tested this click prototype that we developed with our designer, and we figured out and we learned, hey, like these really advanced Bitcoin users, they actually think this is super cool. Like they understand the need to make something that's approachable for the average user, and they're actually super happy to use a simple user interface. And that like took a lot of, I guess, that removed a lot of doubt and kind of fear also within the team, and kind of gave us a bit more clarity into what we wanted to build also going forward. And yeah, and then we just after we kind of went through that process, then we built it out, and the I guess the result is the current alpha.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's a beautiful, man. I have to say, this is absolutely beautiful. Like, I tweeted out that this is kind of looking like mainstream software, right? Like, this is this is knocking out the door. This is approaching mainstream level user interface. we're getting there. Like this, I'm not saying that it is mainstream, right? I'm saying that we are approaching this. We are getting really close with a release like this, in my opinion. So this is really great. So let's get into a little bit more of some of the actual user experience metaphors that you used in this particular release. So maybe you can get into a little bit about this idea of checking versus savings and how you guys are viewing that as a user experience in the wallet.
Sure. So the idea is we obviously Lightning, the Lightning app runs on a computer that's connected to the internet, and it runs on PCs and Macs, and these are obviously highly susceptible to malware and just well-known attacks, right? So the attack surface for these computers is very high, and that's why it's obviously always best practice to keep your Bitcoin in cold storage, either with a hardware wallet or some other means. And that's what we kind of see as the savings account, right? So the user savings account is where they keep their long-term holdings, and they should keep their holdings there, right? We don't want them to put any life-changing money in our wallet. What we do suggest that users do is kind of see Lightning as their checkings account. So basically, for day-to-day transactions, the metaphorical coffee or whatever, you want to pay that with Lightning, right? So you might, I don't know, put like a few $100 or whatever you're comfortable with in your checkings account or in this app, and then you can just use that to buy your beer, your coffee, whatever.
Great. So, I mean, that makes sense, I think, to the average normal person. Like the checking, of course, is your day to day, and then you have a savings account where you store your long term funds, and that really makes sense to me as a regular banking user, of course, growing up with the traditional banking system, and then the actual UX. I mean, it really the user interface, the user experience really looks good. I think I want to just screen share this for the people who are viewing between this purple and this orange. This is really beautiful. Let's get into a little bit of that. Maybe you can describe how that works in the user experience itself in the UX. How does like a user? How are you telling the user the difference between this checking and the savings? Are you guys making it really seamless?
Sure, yeah. So when you set up the app, what actually happens is we kind of present during the onboarding process, right? We ask you to back up your seed, like in that screen exactly. And after you do that and you set your password to kind of encrypt your wallet on disk, we show you a basically just your on-chain address, right? So we display a QR code, which is basically just says here you can fund your checkings account, right? So and we kind of guide the user along the way there. And once he gets to the home screen of the app, which is the main purple screen with the balance on it, Autopilot, which is a feature that is included in LND, the protocol layer of the app, Autopilot will actually just open up channels for you automatically. And this is where I don't know if it's a little bit too small to see here, but the lower balance number says pending deposit. This is where your on-chain funds will be displayed once they're confirmed. And then as Autopilot opens payment channels for you, that balance will move up to the big number in the middle, where those are actually your open channel, like the sum of your open channels.
Awesome. I really like this. I really like how the pending is small so that it's very understanding that this is something you don't want to pay a whole lot of attention to right now, the main focus is your main balance, but yet you still display it directly centered underneath it. So again, it gives it significance from a space, from an actual space perspective, but then the size of it just tells the whole story that you need to know, which is, hey, this is just pending. Don't worry too much about this. It's going to confirm. Don't worry, everything will be okay. And so it kind of reassures the user a little bit. So that's really great. Let's see here. Maybe you can talk about another reason why you created this, why you really need to separate these two, the Lightning and Bitcoin, because maybe you can talk about some of the security implications about why we need to do this, why we need to make sure that we separate, at least right now, the experience from Lightning and traditional Bitcoin.
Sure. So actually, the idea, the inspiration actually came from the iMessage app that's on your iPhone, right? if you type in a phone number where the other user doesn't have an iPhone, it'll be displayed green, and you'll just send a regular SMS. But when you type in a phone number and the other end is also using an iPhone, it'll be blue, right? And this means that, like, to the user, the user doesn't really need to understand those protocol details. But if you're tech savvy and if you understand the advantages of iMessage, you'll understand that, first of all, like, this won't be, like, I won't get charged for SMS fees, and also this will be end-to-end encrypted, right? So those two colors have different properties, and we kind of were inspired by that to say, okay, we want to do the same thing here with the payment screen. If you paste in an on-chain address, like, the screen will kind of flip to orange, and this kind of suggests, okay, this is kind of like the slow case. There will be on-chain fees, so it'll be slower and more expensive. And if you're pasting in a Lightning invoice, it'll stay purple. So purple for us is like you're in the Lightning context, and orange, you're kind of doing on-chain transactions, right?
Very cool, very cool. And this is brilliant. I mean, I never even, thought about that really as it pertains to Lightning this is something that we use every day, that color scheme on the actual text message. I mean, I've seen it, we've all seen it a million times. It's either blue or green, right? So that's really brilliant, I think, to translate that over here into a Lightning wallet, because again, the Lightning wallet is a hot wallet. So that means, of course, that your private key is exposed to the internet. So you have to be, of course, careful. So we want to make sure the end user knows, hey, don't put too much money in this. And in fact, you guys even do in this alpha limit the amount that you can actually even spend in Lightning itself. So that's again really important. And again, some of the naysayers will be like, "Oh, how's it supposed to scale if you limit it?" But again, guys, this is how we test software. This is going to be eventually removed. We don't need to keep the size, a specific size, forever. This is going to improve in the future. So maybe we could talk. I'd like you maybe a little bit to explain, because we kind of blew past it a little bit, about the importance of changing the text from mnemonic seed, right, to recovery phrase. Maybe talk a little bit about that as well. Some of the text changes, in addition to just the UX, just the graphical changes.
Sure. So we kind of just did a little bit of research, and, like, what were other applications and other wallets using. Actually, I think one of the best user experiences that Bitcoin has right now is the Ledger hardware wallet, right? I think it's in terms of usability and the language, just like the language that it uses, it's not as techy. For instance, I tried Trezor. Is like, if you're really comfortable with the technology and you want everything to be open source, I think Trezor is the way to go for you. But in terms of, like, for the average user, the language that Ledger uses and also the design is a little bit more approachable. And we just kind of looked, okay, what were they using for terminology? And they were using they were calling it recovery phrase. And then we also kind of looked at, okay, what are other applications, like the Apple account recovery key, right? So you always find that word recovery in there, and I feel like there's many smart UX researchers and other people that have kind of put a lot of thought into this terminology, and to me, it just makes sense. All right, we will just reuse that, right? Because these are terms that people will maybe have seen in other applications and that they're just comfortable with.
I think it's really important to get, this is the beginning. This is the early days. Again, guys, this is the time where we need to start training users on names of things, right? On metaphors of things. This is the time to train the user. So it's really important that we get this right now, because in the future we don't want to have too much complexity. It's just going to slow adoption. So this is the time now where we have to start making these decisions. And I think that this is a great decision here of changing it, to recovery phrase. That is, I think, much more important than, again, trying to, display everything, the whole kitchen sink at once. I mean, it's great. Like, we love developers, right? We love the coders. I'm a web developer myself. We love the developers. But at the end of the day, guys, look, we need really, really usable experiences. We don't want to throw the whole kitchen sink up at the users at once. And so, as I predicted, earlier in the year, I told you guys that eventually channels will just completely disappear. They will completely disappear into the UX. They, back in the UX that we don't actually need them eventually one day. But again, this is still a bit early, so we still do expose the channels in this app. That's correct. If that's correct, right, Tank? And maybe you can talk a little bit about how you differentiate the color of some of the more advanced options in the wallet.
Sure. So our designer Lee, he's also super. He did the whole like visual design, and we did the whole like kind of sprint process with him. And he's also really his background is in building like consumer interfaces at Nokia. So he's also really passionate about having like a simple UI. But I think he also understood that like this protocol stuff, you can't just wish it away, especially not in the early versions. So he came up with a concept called dark mode, which means that the screen kind of changes to like the purple, the dark midnight purple there, and the font is actually white. So it allows you to read more dense information, and it also kind of gives the user indication that this is something where this is just something that's a little bit different than kind of the primary actions. So that was the whole idea of that. And for instance, this is the channels page, the screenshot there, and this is something that we hope will just kind of disappear over time, especially as the routing infrastructure matures, and it kind of just works.
Sure. So we have a couple of things to mention here. So one of the things that you guys also mentioned in this article is about using your local currency by default. And maybe we can talk about that, and then after that, I'd like to talk about pasting in an address or a Lightning invoice and it just working. Like that's again more of this just working stuff. This is how it's supposed to be, and this only can come from maturity from time, from playing with this, from actually trying things out, right, and seeing what works and what doesn't. So again, Lightning Network continues to mature, and this I think is a great example, and that's the main reason why I wanted to create this show, is to show my audience and show people that Lightning continues to mature, and this is another step in that evolution.
Sure. Sorry, what was the question again?
Oh yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I was a little bit long-winded there. So maybe you can talk about why you guys decided to make the local currency the default, right, instead of a Bitcoin or a crypto amount, and then maybe talk a little bit about how that just work approach is applied to the pasting in of addresses.
Sure. So the whole fiat currency thing was also a bit contentious within the team, because I mean, we're all super passionate about Bitcoin, and I think we all agree that it's like very hard money, sound money. It has good qualities in the sense of it being a store of value. But I think we also understand that it's still very early days for Bitcoin because of the low liquidity in the market. The volatility is high, right? So that there's price fluctuations, and this doesn't really make it a very usable unit of account yet, right? And unit of account is basically, it's a function of money. That means you're using this to estimate value, right? So this is something where I'm going to the bakery today and I'm getting a loaf of bread for €1 or $1. And when I go to the bakery in a week, I also expect that loaf of bread to still be $1, right? And with Bitcoin, that's still not really the case. Hopefully it will be one day, and we can just like switch back to BTC. But now I think right now it's like for using this as a means of like day-to-day transactions. The idea is like, yes, you're funding your wallet with BTC, and basically that's what you're storing. But in terms of like displaying the actual value that's in the wallet, and also when you're doing a transaction, the kind of the feedback or the confirmation that the user sees, and by default it will be in their local fiat currency. So the wallet actually looks at your operating system locale and checks, okay, like my wallet, for instance, it sees I'm in Germany, and then it will just display euros for me. Whereas if you're opening the app on your computer and you probably have US language settings, it'll display US dollars, right? And so this is kind of the idea that this allows us to work with the unit of account that we're comfortable with, And this is like super handy when, especially if you've ever used PayPal to settle transactions while you're traveling. And like me, I have a German bank account, and I might be settling transaction with somebody, a friend of mine, who has a US bank account in US dollars. If you're sending from country to country, or you're in the same country, it's basically free. But if you're doing it between German and US bank accounts, it's actually, I think it's around 10% end to end, the fee. So it's really expensive. And this is where we hope, like, to have the first real use case for users to make it kind of clear where the value is. So you're going to send a US dollar amount, and that is going to be displayed on my end when I receive it in euros, and there's going to be almost no fees, right? And that's a super cool value proposition. I think that everybody that travels can understand. And that's like what we hope will be for the early adopters of this, will be like the first aha moment where, okay, right, this might be very like obvious to everybody in the Bitcoin space, but I think a lot of people, when I explain this to my parents or whatever, that's where they actually see, okay, this is what it could bring to me, right?
Yeah, this is a great. I mean, proof of concept. I mean, we can see that once you have everything set up with the wallet, you can just send instant transactions. You get the color change. So yeah, I think that if a regular person looked at that, especially like a millennial or somebody in the younger age bracket, right, they would definitely be able to play to get this to work, right? If it was in final version and on their iOS, everything would be seamless because the way that it looks now, there's just a couple of buttons and you guys have it all set up so that it acts just like a traditional Venmo or PayPal account, pretty much. So that's pretty awesome. Now it is interesting that there was contention within the team to make the fiat amount the default, but it just makes sense because I try to tell everybody, look, it is early days right now. It is going to take years for this to play out, decades, if not more. And so we have to be aware of these phases, right? There's some of these phases that is in Bitcoin's history. And we are in the phase now where we're in this like accumulation transition stage, maybe not even to the transition stage yet. We're starting to get into the transition stage, but it's such early days that we're talking like 1 or 2% of the planet maybe is, into Bitcoin at the most, if that's being pretty generous. And so during this stage, we do have to be aware of what the user is thinking and what we want their experience to be. And this, to me, makes sense. And so I can see how it couldn't be contentious, but at the same time, for a regular user who just wants to get up and going and start, making payments, this is, I think, the way to go. So I'm glad you guys ended up choosing this. And again, this is something that can be adjusted. It's just software. We can always change this as the network and the market matures. Now, maybe you can just talk a little bit about the pasting of the addresses, because again, this is part of that seamless experience that I think you guys want to create for novice users to be able to take advantage of this. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that, how that came to be, and how you guys approached that.
Sure. Also, one note about the fiat thing, like in general, this current version is like what people in the startup space like to call it an MVP, a minimum viable product. So it's kind of like the first version you throw out in the market and kind of see what happens. It's by no means like a final decision. If we get the feedback that everybody wants to have BTC by default, we can always change that back, right?
Absolutely.
This is just an experiment. About the copy and pasting. So the way that works is you on the payment screen. I think there's actually a screenshot in that blog post. Yeah, that one. So either you're coming from like a website like y'all's, and you click on an invoice link, and it'll automatically parse the invoice and display the lightning confirmation. That's like the one path that the user can take, or the user can just copy and paste the invoice in there, right? And the invoice is something that maybe not every Bitcoin user might be familiar with. They might be familiar with the address. So it's like this string of characters. And then an invoice is similar in that regard in terms of the user experience, in that it's just also a string of characters. It's just a bit longer, right? But fundamentally, that's how we want users to kind of see it. So I'm sending somebody value, and all I need to do is copy and paste this string. It might be a bit longer than the string I'm used to, but I just paste it in there. And then what happens is it kind of displays the confirmation there with the fee, which in this case is super, super low, 1 Satoshi, and then the user can just confirm, and the kind of the transaction settles instantly.
Awesome. Yeah, this is great. For the people who are just listening, for the audio listeners, we are displaying screenshots and the article that was released with this new version, and it is really great to see that you can just, there's this text box where you can just paste in, whatever it is, if it's a Bitcoin address or a Lightning, invoice, you just paste it in there, and the wallet will automatically handle it and display everything for you, and it will display it in a really, really easy way. If you guys can see the interface right now, you could see that there's literally just it's just a purple background with an amount and a big confirm button. It just makes it really easy. Again, looking more like this Venmo, PayPal style of app. Just really, 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 really simple, really, really smooth. Just gradients, in solid colors. No shadows or crazy things like that. Just very, very solid metronome sort of style. Really, really cool. I like it. So then I do have one final question here before we wrap this up. So let me ask you this, Tank. This is from the chat here, from Ntextra 300. Maybe you can tell us just a little bit in general, kind of a high level. I know you're not a protocol developer, but maybe you can tell us how are things specifically around Autopilot and routing maturing? Like you said already, of course, that it's still early, and so we're still having to display the channel and the UX. But how is that actually progressing? And maybe do you have any timeframes of when you think that can just sort of start to disappear? Not disappear completely, but just start to disappear.
Sure. So, I mean, it will be possible that we kind of let that disappear once the routing infrastructure is highly available and there's enough liquidity, right?
So yeah, that's the two big things that is really required is the maturity of the routing part of the protocol, and of course the liquidity. So yeah, that's true. That's a couple big things. So maybe you can tell us how that Autopilot and routing is coming along.
Sure. So we actually just hired 2 new people who are gonna be tackling the infrastructure and the routing part, because these are just like fundamentally hard problems, right? So um, there's multiple things that need to be solved there. The uptime and availability of the nodes, and you can basically incentivize routing nodes to have high availability, right? Because they might get like more payments routed through them if they're more available, and obviously if they offer liquidity, that's also something that can be incentivized. So these are all things that need to be developed on the protocol layer. And also, yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of the routing part of it. And I think once that's the case, we will get to a point where Autopilot we can set some heuristics. So Autopilot is basically the part of LND that connects to routing nodes or just nodes in general. But we don't really have very fleshed out heuristics yet about which node we connect to. But once we do have basically this really mature routing infrastructure with high availability, we can actually connect to routing nodes that we know are highly available. And this is where Autopilot would get more dependable, right? And this is then where the whole channel management just is not relevant to the user anymore, because it just works, right? It kind of works in the background. When the app gets the first funding, what we actually do is when the user funds the wallet, we actually start opening channels from that zeroconf inbound transaction, because I'm just sending transactions to myself, right? Because I'm opening channels. So and in the best case, that will be done in 1 or 2 transactions. I think right now best case will be 2 transactions, so 20 minutes. But I think once we kind of also consider the transactions that are still in the mempool, we can actually cut that down to a single confirmation where you're funding your wallet and we're opening all of the channels like in a single 10-minute time frame, like in the best case, right? And that will be that together with the whole autopilot thing would be basically, I'm opening my checking account in 10 minutes, right? Like, and that would be a super, like, when you compare it to the banking industry, like where can I open my checkings account in 10 minutes, right? I need to go
Nowhere. You can't do
exactly,
anything in 10 minutes in the traditional banking system.
exactly, and especially not on a Sunday, right? So this is, I think, where once all this stuff gets more mature, and this will take some time, but I'm pretty optimistic that we'll get there, and then it's super seamless, right? Um, yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm definitely looking forward to, the continuing evolution of Bitcoin itself, because remember, there's a whole lot of work on the base layer as well. But really, I try to tell everybody that the most exciting stuff right now really is happening with Lightning. That's where all of the excitement and the development is happening within Bitcoin. But that's not to say that there isn't a whole lot of work being done on privacy tech, on more optimization on the base layer. There's just a lot of work being done all around. So that's really great. Now, let me just ask you one last question here. So, what is next then for both Lightning Labs, and what is next for this wallet for you?
Sure. So for the wallet, what right now we're on testnet. It's an alpha, and this has a lot to do with the fact that Neutrino, so the light client part of the protocol of LND, isn't yet ready for mainnet. So once mainnet, so for instance, once Neutrino is in Bitcoin Core and the market share for Neutrino is high enough, and also within LND, the implementation, the client implementation is mature enough. Like once all these puzzle pieces come together, then LND will basically have Neutrino on mainnet, and that's when also the wallet app will probably be available on mainnet. That's the next step. We're also working on, so the whole application. If you're kind of familiar with programming and maybe some of the software, we're using React Native, which is a technology which allows you to write kind of the user interface with a platform independent components. So all the components that you see on the desktop app actually render on iOS and Android as well with the same code. So and that's why it kind of looks like a mobile first design. So that's kind of the next steps for the app team, is to port the user interface to mobile, and also from like the protocol side, also have like we need to do a lot of optimizations within LND to also make it faster and use less memory and less battery on your iPhone. And so basically the next step for the app is actually iOS, and then later Android. iOS is a bit easier because usually most of the market is actually on the current version of iOS, so it's as a developer it's easier to develop for. Whereas Android is very fragmented, especially in developing markets where you have very old versions of Android that you need to support. So we're going with iOS first, and then Android second. And yeah, in terms of what's next for Lightning Labs, we're also working on some things which I can't talk about in terms of our our stuff for our business model. So we obviously are a for-profit company. We have investors, and we want to have a sustainable business long term to sustain all this development. And we're working on some things as well.
Awesome. So it sounds like you guys got a lot of plans. What's really great is the iOS implementation. Really, really looking forward to that. I think that's going to be really great and fun to play around with, because again, that's kind of where most of the users are. And it's a shame that the Android market, the Android device market to this day is still so fragmented. I thought maybe they would try to address that at some point, but they're clearly to this day still not even like attempting to address the fragmentation. It's actually just, in my opinion, sort of continuing to get exponentially worse. I don't know about you, but that's what I found from trying to develop on Android. Now, of course, I'm using C# and cross-platform code and things like that, but still, to try to get it to work correctly on every Android device it seems to be becoming more and more futile. So pretty crazy stuff there. Now, somebody in the chat was kind of funny. They're saying like, if Bitcoin depends on Lightning, then Bitcoin is doomed. And it's like, yeah, people need to understand Bitcoin doesn't depend on anything. If Lightning actually failed, we would just figure out what went wrong and build something else that would work. This is how software development works. Welcome to programming. Like, this is how it works, man. Trial and error. But again, some of the smartest people in the world, continue to talk about this, continue to discuss about this, and they are implementing. They are doing. This is happening now. So really, really important to keep that in mind, guys. This is not vaporware, right? As we were told for so long. This is, I'm not hearing the BCH people and other people saying vaporware so much anymore. So that's kind of funny. That's really great because it never, ever was vaporware anyway. But now we are seeing the evolution. And of course, the launch on mainnet earlier this year. So let me just ask you this then, Tank, where, if people wanted to get involved, with Lightning development, with LND, or any of the implementations that are out there, what are some of the resources? Maybe a couple of links. Maybe if you have anything off the top of your head that a person could go to approach this.
Sure. So there's our website, our homepage is lightning.engineering, and we have a lot of like developer resources, like our Slack, where we have a Slack for L&D, we have a Slack for the app, a channel for the app, where people can, start testing, giving feedback. We have a bunch of people in the Slack actually that started sending pull requests and started contributing to the code as well. And so we're all on GitHub under Lightning Labs. And there's also a lightning.network, which I think points to more general, like, industry links. Like, there's also other vendors working on this, like C Lightning. But I think, yeah, off the top of my head, those are the only two websites that I can think of.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. Again, I think that's the biggest ones that people need to go to. And I think another big point about there was that you guys have a Slack, right? You guys are there. This is how open source development works, man. People are there to answer your questions. People are there to help. They are there to help you get started. Now, of course, nobody's going to take your hand, right? But if you are proven that you are passionate, that you are trying, that you are really trying to work with this, of course you're going to get help. And and we're going to be, the person would be able to tell, right? If they're like, hey, just what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Well, obviously, then they're just a noob. They're not trying to actually make this stuff work. But if you guys are working with this, again, this early day technology, if you guys are there and are hashtag reckless, there are people there that are willing to help you out. So I'm really, really happy to hear that. And again, of course, this is just how open source development works. Nicolas Doye, who is the teacher there of our Programming with Bitcoin workshop, programmingwithbitcoin.com workshop. He has his own Slack as well, but he welcomes people in and helps out. And I just really love it. I love the ethos of this bottom up approach, this grassroots movement of this free open source software development. So really, really awesome, Tank. Thank you so much for joining. I mean, this app really, in my opinion, is another leap forward in the evolution of Bitcoin and Lightning, specifically Lightning. And I absolutely think that there is huge amounts of value in making the Lightning protocol more accessible to novice users like this, with projects like this, because this is how it's going to be in the future. In the future, you will just download and hit exe, right? In the future, it's going to be super simple in the future eventually, once this stuff gets built out. And as somebody in the chat said, the latest narrative against Lightning is that it's too complex. Of course, it's not super easy yet, guys. This is early days command line stuff. But man, this wallet, this right here, in my opinion, this release is proof that we are getting there. This is definitely another milestone in the long race to getting this stuff mainstream. So thanks so much, Tank, for joining us, man. I really had a great time. Why don't you tell the users, the audience, where can we find out more about you, sir?
Sure. So I'm on Twitter, just Tankred Hase, and just tweet it at me if you have any feature requests or just any questions. Yeah, I think that's the best place to find me online.
Absolutely. If you don't like the look of it, please go tweet at him now and tell him to change it. No, it's a beautiful app, guys, and I'm really, really excited for the future of Lightning Network. And again, I've been doing a bunch of shows on the network, the CryptoCast network, about Lightning, interviewing developers, interviewing Lightning, people working within the Lightning space. As you mentioned, we had Jack Mallers on there, and that was a great time. Hey, 18 months, guys. Okay, this is what I still
18 months, guys.
I'm still sticking to that. 18 months, end of next year. Lightning fully developed in the ecosystem itself with exchanges, wallets, all within the crypto ecosystem. I'm not saying mainstream or to the world, but I'm saying fully fleshed out in the crypto ecosystem. Every wallet, every exchange has to support it, or else, because the amount of liquidity that'll be on there, or else it'll be like not supporting the internet. So really, really important. So we'll see how it goes, Dank. We'll see how it goes. But man, with people with people like you, with people like you and Jack and everybody out there, Elizabeth Stark, everybody out there working on all the individual teams, I'm really, really hopeful because the progress continues. You guys just keep releasing new versions, both Blockstream, with C Lightning, and LND with Lightning Labs. Just everybody, they just keep an async. Everybody just keeps releasing new versions, and it's just really, really awesome to see the progress. So thanks again, Tank, so much for joining us. Really had a great time. Again, guys, we have a lot more stuff on the CryptoCast Network to come, both now and in the future. We are launching a new episode of Bitcoin Matters today, hosted by Beautyon. So catch that in a couple hours. Make sure to be on the lookout for that. And then, of course, this Sunday will be another episode of the Bitcoin News Show, and we have a couple special guests on there. One of them being Mr. Kevin Pham himself. So if you guys want to join the hashtag family, make sure with the PH, make sure to join us this Sunday on the Bitcoin News Show. So again, guys, thanks so much for joining. We had a great time in the chat. A couple of naysayers in the chat, but that's okay. We still are positive, and we still love what we're talking about. So again, guys, thanks so much for joining. And until next time, keep talking Bitcoin. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.